Hello, this is Abby Mickey, women's cycling reporter for Escape Collective. If you're listening to this podcast, that means that you already must like the content that we create, or at least you're intrigued about some of the things that we have to say. Unlike a lot of other podcasts out there, we are coming to you without ads. We're not trying to sell you any supplements or nail polish, and the only way that we're able to do that is because of our members. And in order to continue making all the great content that we do, we need the support of you, the listener. If you're not a member of the Escape Collective, I'm here asking you, imploring you, maybe begging you to consider signing up for a membership. It's super easy. Just head on over to escapecollective.com/member. You can sign up to support the awesome things that we do over at Escape Collective, because if you like what we do, support us. Become a member. There's a lot more to it than just giving us a couple bucks, and that's being part of the community that we've created at Escape Collective, the Discord, and high-fiving rights if you ever see any of us on the ground at a race in the grocery store. So consider signing up. Ask your friends. If you know your friends listen to these podcasts or read our site, then maybe give them a little nudge. Encourage them to become a member. Once again, it's escapecollective.com/member. And thank you so much for all the support so far in this journey at Escape Collective.
Welcome back to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome, and joining me this week is Ronan McLaughlin, our tech editor in Ireland. Welcome, Ronan.
Thank you, Dave.
Also joining me is Brad Copeland, former mountain bike world mechanic to the stars, and recently chosen a bit of a quieter path in the shop life of things. Brad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Dave.
Of course. Before we kick into our usual episode covering exciting new bikes, what's on our mind, and perhaps a few other little quick tech tidbits, I also just wanted to let you know that we are conducting a survey. So the survey is just for our podcast. It's if you listen to any of our podcasts, if you're listening to this, then that's you. It'll help us inform decisions moving forward, hopefully make the product better. So if you'd like to help with that, then please head to escapecollective.com/survey and leave your feedback to help us improve. So with that, let's start the episode. Firstly, I have a bit of a corrections corner. It's not really a necessary corrections corner, but Brad, last week you asked me, we're discussing a Bianchi, their Arcade X gravel bike, and you asked me what would now be the ugliest bike on the market, and I couldn't answer it. And I had to think, and I remembered what the ugliest bike on the market now is.
Lay it on me.
Polygon Tambora. I saw this one in person. It's a carbon fiber gravel bike, and it feels like they took cues from the original Bianchi Arcade X. So I think they now deserve that mantelpiece. So we'll now use that as the benchmark for things that don't want to be benchmarked.
Congratulations, Polygon.
All right, let's cover some news. We'll get to a few things that Ronan's been handling as of late, and then Ronan will duck off because it's a pretty nasty time zone for him. Ronan, Pinarello, they have a new Dogma. What can you tell me about this?
Yes, I thought you were going to go with something else there first. So you're going to have to give me a second just while I switch notes. But the news you're actually talking about is that Pinarello have officially unveiled the new Dogma that we spotted a couple of weeks ago, just before Criterium de Dauphiné. And what they have confirmed is that it retains the Dogma F nomenclature or name. There's no change to the name. And the new Dogma is, well, very much an iteration rather than an entirely new frame, kind of as we had seen previously. But what I learned in sitting in on a presentation last week, I was actually due to travel to the launch of this new Dogma. Unfortunately, I couldn't make that. Had to cancel at the last moment, unfortunately. So apologies to everybody there. But what I learned in that presentation was there's a bit more to this new bike than just meets the eye. And I think we had speculated previously when I was last on this podcast that what are you going to do if the bike looks the same? Presumably the things you can really do are just make it lighter or stiffer or whatever. And that's kind of what Pinarello were claiming. They're using a new Toray M40X carbon fiber layup, which they have said follows on from testing on the old X-Lite models that they used to make for Vroom and the likes. And the result of using that new carbon fiber is that you get an increased tensile strength for improved lateral stiffness, which, having read the previous Dogma, that sounds like good news to me. If that is in fact what they have achieved.
Okay, so can you confirm if it's a new mold, like exterior? Is it a new shape in any ways?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are subtle changes all over that sort of combine for. Well, actually, Pinarello made this, and there is still a chance I'm going to travel to Pinarello. That might be rescheduled to try to find out a bit more about this, because in the presentation, Pinarello, they talked about this study that Ineos Grenadiers had seemingly done during the 2022 Tour de France. They'd measured all of Geraint Thomas's what they call performance data from that tour, and then studied the average energy expenditure and balanced with potential savings he could have made in different riding scenarios. They basically figured out that over varied terrain, stay with me here, over varied terrain, aero gains are worth more than weight savings, which, I mean, is kind of what that is believable, because that's probably what we would have said anyway. And off the back of that, what Pinarello targeted with this new bike was a 0.2% reduction in CDA, which seems like a new confusing way to make an aero claim. But yeah, the bike is in the new Dogma, which does have thinner down tube, thinner head tube. The down tube is actually angled. Like I wasn't entirely clear but what Pinarello had said on the presentation was that it's rotated by 3.5 degrees, and this improves the aero performance over the bottom bracket by a claimed 1.2%. The head tube also, if you think back to that article I wrote back in January about what the head tubes can tell you about an overall aero philosophy, well, actually, Pinarello have reduced the width of the head tube by actually a quite considerable 8 millimeters, which, I mean, it wasn't the biggest head tube to start with, so 8 mil is quite a bit. To do that, they've had to change how they route the hoses through the headset. They've had to introduce an elliptical steerer tube design, which is not something they've done previously. They've also slimmed down the fork legs, like the external part of the fork, again for a bit more aero. They've hidden the through axles, like the end of the through axles, which is something we've seen previously on like BMCs and that. There's a new seat clamp. One of the other things we speculated might get was the handlebars, and they have made the handlebars lighter also. I think the thing I was most excited by, knowing that at some point I probably will test this bike, was that they have now changed to a 47mm rake on the forks, which for my size and for my preference of trail figures brings it right in line with what I would want. But the problem though is that Pinarello were just using a 47mm rake fork across their entire size range. So I think
all 63 sizes.
I can't quite recall the exact number of sizes now. Was it 13 with the old one? It might be 11 with this one. Don't quote me on that. I think they have reduced the size count by 1 or 2. Could be entirely wrong about that, but it's not something I checked before this call. But I know for like a very small size, you end up getting these huge trail figures, which, yeah, I'd asked them on the call, why do we not get, or was there different rakes for other size frames? And no, there isn't. So that's not something that's going to change. But overall, I mean, the headline figure here, 0.2% reduction in CDA. And and 108 grams lighter. So the new claimed weight of the new Dogma F with SRAM red axis and Princeton Carbon Works Peak 4550s is 6.63 kilos. I don't have a size or for that, but if that's true, that's now a light Dogma. Much lighter than part of that doesn't really add up for me. Like that seems like a bigger than 108 gram saving over the old frame if it is actually down to 6.63. Could be the wheels and group set also, I guess.
Yeah. Ronan, previously you'd said Pinarello have an internal minimum weight limit on frames that they don't believe going under. Have they just broken that rule?
I don't think they have, because I think about 50 grams worth of that saving comes from the handlebars alone. And so they probably, like when you actually look at the frame, it's got thinner all over, but it's got sort of deeper on the head tube, and the bottom bracket seems deeper also. So it's maybe a wash on the frame. Probably something I would want to check if I do get a review model, and something I can ask him when I get there. But I don't think they will have broken it. I think they've found a weight savings elsewhere.
I don't know if you've checked pricing, but I assume it's as expensive as ever.
It's not cheap. Pricing for complete bikes starts at €14,500 or $14,500 US, which is 12,600 sterling. There is no. Sorry, I can also actually just now confirm this. The claimed weight is for a size 53 with no pedals and no bottle cages. And frame set price. Wow, my God. Frame set price, €6,700 for the frame alone, $6,950 US, or £5,500.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, before we move on, I guess it's probably just worth pointing out the obvious here, which is the Dogma. It is a very expensive bike, but it was probably the first in the world tour to converge on aero and lightweight, like where the team would just have the one single bike to use. And it's, I personally didn't think it would happen when you told me that when Pinarello first did this. I wouldn't have said it was going to happen by other brands, but Specialized have followed, and rumors point to Trek following as well. And it does seem to be becoming a trend. So in many ways, this Dogma has led the way.
There were more than a few subtle hints about other brands may now be starting to offer one bike, but we have always done one bike. They didn't use the one bike to build them all phrase or anything like that, but it just said, like, Pinarello have always believed that you need one bike that can perform on the flats and the mountains, and now other brands are following suit. They also, which I kind of thought was interesting, they pointed out in the press release that their head tube is now thinner and faster, a feature that they first integrated 10 years ago with the F8 in 2014, which I mean is obviously a subtle hint at the fact that Specialized didn't do that first.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, incredibly expensive bike, but yeah, always worth talking about because they do some interesting things. So Ronan, before we let you go, there's one other thing that's happened this week in the world of tech, and that is the Coros computer. Can you tell us about that?
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about it, so I'll leave this up to you.
You know nothing about it. Okay, well that's a challenge.
Well,
to
that's
see if
not true. I know it. Has a very incredibly generous battery life. But I'll let you fill in the details around that.
Yeah, basically it's a new head unit from Coros. Coros, the American brand who started off with helmets like 10 years ago, a smart helmet, and then moved into offering like multi-sport watches. They have now come out with a head unit called the Jura, and Jura I assumed was like short for durable or something to that effect, because it has, as you mentioned, got an incredibly long battery life. It's actually the Spanish word for like strong, if I remember correctly from the presentation I watched earlier this week. Also, I've actually got one of these head units here also, and I mean the key features are acclaimed 120 hours of ride time, in a single charge with full GPS support. The front of the new head unit is like, it looks like a huge screen, but actually when you turn it on, it's like, it's not quite half and half, but the actual screen isn't the entire front face of the head unit. A considerable portion of the head unit is these solar panels that they've used, and those solar panels are, well, they seem to be quite powerful because they can charge the head unit at a rate of 2 hours of ride time per 1 hour of time in the sun, which is, I mean, if accurate, means theoretically, if you lived in a sunny environment, you would just never have to charge this thing. If you ride for an hour, you get 2 hours of.
I was going to say, can my Di2 battery plug into this thing?
Before you can ask me what this thing can do, because that's kind of the point I want to get to, let me just rattle off what else it's also got built in. The other key feature here is that instead of just buttons or just touchscreen, it's got a touchscreen, it's got one button, but it's also got a rotary dial on the side, which I was quite interested in when I first seen it, because that's not a solution that we've seen used before with head units. We've seen it in watches and the likes, but never on cycling computers. And so that was interesting. And so when this thing arrived, I was pretty interested to try it out. I have used it quite a bit now at this point, probably upwards of 20-25 hours of riding time in not very sunny Ireland. And I can confirm that the battery for me has been incredible. Like I actually did like a 9-hour bike ride last Saturday. I just happened to get an early Father's Day gift and managed to get out for a long time. And the battery drained like 2% during a 9-hour ride. It was actually quite impressive. Unfortunately, the rest of the head unit is not yet quite impressive. And actually, Coros have asked that basically we don't do reviews of these things just yet because they're not quite ready yet. And so there was a first look embargo for earlier this week. We don't really do first looks here at Escape because I don't think they really value either the audience or our time or anything. So that's not something we did. We'll discuss it here now. But they've embargoed actual reviews until I think July 15th, when these things are going to ship, and when Coros are confident that they will have sort of fixed some of the issues that popped up for me. Those, I don't know if you want me to read out the list of notes that I had with things that I didn't quite enjoy about this head unit just yet, but let's just say most of them I think can be fixed with firmware upgrades and that sort of thing. I mean, like things like it go ahead, sorry, Dave.
I was going to say, you can let us know what you don't think they can fix.
That's what I wanted to know too.
Oh, okay. Well, the only sort of structural problem, let's say, that I found was just that rotary dial is actually just too fiddly when you're riding on a bike, and it's just too easy to scroll past what you want, and then you have to like click it in to select something, and when you try to click it in, it's just very loose, so it sort of moves off the selection you wanted to make, and that wasn't as good an experience as I was hoping for. I often accidentally just scroll past what I wanted, or but yeah, I don't see that being something that is fixable. Well, it's not something that's fixable with a firmware upgrade. The other thing that sort of struck me about it was that while it was fiddly for me, and I'm right-handed, and this thing's on the right-hand side of the head unit, I kind of wonder if you were left-handed and you were having to use your right hand, where presumably you have less dexterity or whatever, would it be even more of a problem? I don't know. But yeah, I think it just needs to be a more solid or more gauge or more like it needs more force to turn it over, I think, and it would be better then. Perhaps they can do that with, the first batch of these is obviously already made, but maybe the next one they can make it stiffer or something. But the other things then were just so many features are either not in this yet, or have been in it and been removed, or don't work. Things like it connects to your Di2, but it doesn't actually let you control the head unit screen with your Di2, or it doesn't record it just tells you what gear you're in. It doesn't record like shifting data into the fit file, or there's no other connectivity through it. I found it sort of hallucinating with my Varia radar, where it would like beep at me for. I couldn't quite figure out if it was beeping at me because it hallucinated a vehicle behind me, or if it like had picked up vehicles going in the opposite direction and beeped those at me, which I've never had with any other head unit. It also like does a really bad job of handling cars that get sort of delayed behind you for a bit, or vehicles that get delayed behind you, and just like keeps giving you a vehicle warning and an all clear beep on and off, on and off, on and off, which again is probably something they can fix. At the moment there's no like live activity tracker to share with family or that, and they do a lot of these things I've said will be fixed within a week or two. But yeah, there's one other neat feature I should probably mention, in that on the if you think of other head units and you bring up your map page, you've got like 2, 3 or 4 data fields that you can program into the map page, and you're sort of fixed with those. With the Coros, what they've introduced is a split screen option, where you turn on split screen and then you can effectively scroll through a much larger list of data fields. And so your map remains like most of the screen. You've got 2 data fields at the bottom and you can scroll through them. It is kind of neat, but again, it's just something that's kind of not completely baked yet and still needs some more time in the oven, I think. And that's kind of the feeling I got with this entire head unit, was like, it has potential, I think, to be a really, really good head unit. It's something that a lot of people will really like, but it just seems like it's not ready yet. Give it time. I'm sure it probably will be, but I don't know. Obviously, there was they'd drawn a line where they wanted to launch this middle of June and ship them by the middle of July, and I just don't think that was right.
But it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds from a hardware point of view really impressive, but yeah, you do have to wonder whether they would have been more successful with the launch of this if they just waited a little bit. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what comes in the next few weeks, whether they can fix these big issues quickly or whether they take a while to do it. But Ronan, I assume you'll be hitting update with every day. And
I mean, that's the thing about it. So like pretty much every day since that, there has been an update. So they are, they seem to be, and it was even before the first look embargo earlier this week. There were updates coming constantly for it. I'm sort of in a predicament at the moment where I'm planning quite a big ride starting 5 hours from now, and I have this sort of dilemma where I can either take my Garmin 1040 or I can take this new Coros. I don't have the Wahoos at the moment; they're not with me here. And I just don't trust either of them to record this ride, and I really don't want to get to the end of it. And really, the Coros, I have no reason to doubt that the Coros would lose the file, but there is plenty of evidence to suggest that the file that it would keep either might not have all the data, or might not have accurate data, or might be perfect, as it was for me on Saturday, but it just doesn't record a lot of stuff. Whereas the Garmin 1040 I have at the moment, for whatever reason, Garmin seems to go through a tough time at the moment with firmware updates, and that thing is infuriating me on a daily basis at the moment. So yeah, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place right now.
Well, Ronan, that topic is something I'm going to get you to come back and talk about with being on your mind. But for now, I'm going to let you sleep, because you just mentioned you have to ride in 5 hours and it's like midnight now. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Hopefully we can get a full episode out of me at some point. Otherwise, they might start docking my pay. But yeah, sometime soon we'll do a full episode with me.
Yeah. When the stars align and the time zones align, we will. All right, Brad. So with Ronan ducking off, let's talk about mountain bikes.
Okay.
Last week we spoke about Specialized bringing back the Crux in an aluminium version, and a week later they've done that with the Epic full suspension, which is pretty exciting. This is called the Chisel FS. Have you seen one of these? I know you wrench at a Specialized dealer.
I do.
You managed to build one of these?
No, so I did in the last week. We received our first Crux, which I should follow up on perhaps right now and just say it was everything we hoped simple, straightforward, nothing that ruffled my feathers, and it behaved in a very approachable for a bike I've never worked on before. There were no hiccups. It seemed all very straightforward. So to the end that we speculated that was the point of the bike in the first place, I think they nailed it. Everything seemed super solid. Nothing that really blew my mind, but again, maybe that's the point. So I would expect the Chisel FS to follow suit, and I think it's the answer to some people's questions about why these gosh darn bikes are so expensive these days. It's not to say this bike's cheap, but it definitely knocks the price down to a pretty approachable level for what appears to be a good quality bike that you can actually have some fun on without too much compromise, I would say, in the spec. And they have a few models available. So a few price points.
Yeah. So it's a 120 on the front, 110 millimeters travel on the rear. It's kind of geometry wise, it's not an exact replica to the new Epic 8. It's more kind of a combination somewhere between the Epic 8 and the previous generation Epic Evo, which is something friend of the podcast, Guy Kesterman, pointed out. Claim frame weight, 2,850 grams, which makes it a bit lighter than the aluminum versions of like the Trek Top Fuel and Scott Spark.
Yeah, they're claiming 18.4% lighter than their nearest competitor. They didn't, in their press release, state who that was. Do you know by any chance, Dave?
I don't. I would have thought probably the Scott Spark, but
yeah, I would assume. But having worked on a few of those, they weren't particularly light in my memory of them. So it's entirely possible somebody's sneaking something in. But it's not a category that really gets a ton of attention or emphasis by many brands right now. And I think maybe Specialized has tapped into a market or a customer that kind of wants a good quality bike, but really doesn't want to spend that much money and doesn't want to buy like a carbon frame with really low end parts or something like that. So hopefully this kind of, I always thought that was a better approach personally, like a good like workhorse group set, whether it's like a XT group or like a SRAM, X9 or whatever that used to be. And now I would say kind of GX maybe is the first SRAM group I would really seriously recommend anybody use who takes bike riding seriously. So yeah, starting with something like that and then a frame that doesn't make the ultimate price of the bike more than $7,000, I think that's going to make a lot of people happy who can still have a nice bike for, its prices are still kind of eye-popping when you think about what an entry-level mountain bike costs these days, and but it's better than it used to be.
Yeah, it makes it far more accessible, a bike like this. And
yes,
you could potentially start with the complete bike and slowly upgrade, or you can buy the frame set, which is the more expensive way of doing it, but much cheaper than a carbon bike. So it looks good. I don't have one to review at the moment. The stock is apparently very limited, but we'll see.
I saw availability was only size mediums right now, so maybe that's always how it is to start, isn't it? You get the mediums going and then fill out the rest. Well,
as someone who rides a medium, I don't know why you'd need any other size. So.
Yeah, perfect. You know what? This bike really actually, I'll just mention this too. It was mentioned by Christopher Blevins, recent World Cup winner and mountain bike and all cycling disciplines, really extraordinaire. American athlete who came up racing, among other things, in NICA leagues, which is like an American high school youth public school affiliated league, and Specialized offers, I think it's like a 25% discount on stuff to NICA athletes. So Chris kind of mentioned that this like would sort of have been the answer to a lot of NICA moms and dads who have these kids racing but don't want to drop, insane money on these bikes. And it's like both of the program that Specialized offers. It's a pretty nice deal for, I would say, in general. It's a good look from Specialized, and it's a solid bike for that program. So I could see this being a kind of popular starting point for a lot of kids who are looking for something that kind of rips but isn't that or the family car kind of a decision.
Yeah, and that's potentially a lot of bikes, because NICA, I'm in Australia, so I'm ignorant to this, but the last figure I heard was like 40,000 students.
Oh, it's yeah. In some parts of the country, they have to run like multiple heats of races just to get it down to like 120 kids for the final. Like, it's insane at some of these things in certain parts. Yeah. So, it's like almost gotten a little bit too much, and they need to figure out a way to, I don't know. It's not 100% fair if you have to race like 3 times and start in 114th place and try to put a result up. But nevertheless, it's awesome to get all these kids out there. So you can't complain too much about it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Also, that's just happened is Spoken, previously known as the Australian Handmade Bike Show. Handmade Bike Show Australia. And yeah, that just happened in Melbourne. I attended. There's galleries up on escapecollective.com. I am also hoping to publish a bonus episode of Geek Warning where I sit down with a few random attendees of the show and speak about bike design. Josh Portner of Silk was there. I sat down with him, spoke about like modern 3D titanium printing and also chain waxing, of course. It's a bit of a mixed bag episode, but certainly some interesting things in there. So check that out when it comes out. So it's probably a few days away after you're hearing this. So yeah, keep in touch with that channel. All right, time to speak about what's on our minds. Brad, what's on your mind?
Everyone's seat post is too long in their frame.
What?
It's like
this is a strange thing to think about, but okay, go on.
Well, I can't help it. I multiple times this week. So when I'm doing like a service on a bike, number one thing I always do, or have started doing, is to pull the seat post out. If there's a dropper post there, it could be an exception depending on how easy it is to do. But to the extent it's feasible to pull the post and clean out the seat tube and seat post, and if there's a wedge or a clamp, to pull that and clean it and grease it and everything. That's often a place where creaks occur. But like a handlebar that's very wide and you don't run it at the full width, you wouldn't just leave the ends on the, hanging off the end when you move your grips and all your controls in. And so maybe out of sight, out of mind, and people don't think about it, but it's often a source of creaks. It can be like lateral loading of the frame with a long seat post in there has many times been the source of a mysterious creak. Of course, some unnecessary weight as well. And you really only need 90 to 100 millimeters, and manufacturers may state this. I would say err on the side of 100 if you aren't sure, but usually it's recommended to be 90. You don't need any more than that. And there's, free weight on the table among other benefits. So, just think about that.
So have you just started harvesting seat post ends?
I wish I had this on my hand. I do have some jewelry that I've made out of stuff, not seat posts because they're too big, but handlebar ends. I made some rings. I used to have an old Merlin with a soft tail. It was, speaking of moots last week, it was a Moots YBB rear end on a Merlin frame, and I won't go into too many details, but I kept kind of like breaking element of the rear. It was a soft tail, like a pivotless soft tail titanium bikes from like the 90s, 2000s. There was a brace at the top of the seat stays that was alloy, and I kept cracking it from like flexing it too much. And they would send me new ones, and a little stanchion element that would slide in and out from the soft tail kind of shock of the rear end of the bike. It was just the right size to fit my index finger. And so, I've been wearing pieces of that bike since then. And that was like 20 something years ago. So no, Dave, to answer your question, not seat posts, but you aren't far off.
Okay. All right. So, I guess the advice there is take your seat post out, and especially if you're chasing a creek, then
it's good to do anyway. I would say it's probably underdone, and it's often neglect that leads to seizures of seat posts and frames, which can be the end of your frame if it gets to a point that's that's a point of no return, basically. So it's a good practice, I would say, especially if you ride in moist environments, ride in the rain or muddy stuff. If you're a mountain bike or gravel enthusiast, stuff runs down the seat post and makes all kinds of nasty deposits inside and leaves gritty residue behind that can cause creaks. So it's good to pull it and clean it regularly anyway, and just reapply whatever compounds, whether it's carbon paste or grease or whatever the case is. Just keep that kind of interface nice and fresh, and that grease can also help to prevent some of that stuff from running down your seat post in the first place. And as we all know, at the bottom of most seat posts, there's the bottom bracket, and then that's where some of the dirt and grit and water can get in there and cause, the problems can then sort of become exacerbated once you mix bearings and sand and water together.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. All right. Good tip. Odd thing to have on your mind, but this is the Geek Wanting podcast, so thank you, Brad. On my mind is last week, I think I mentioned that I might be a reformed chain waxer. And I thought I should probably just clarify that, which is still a big fan of chain waxing, but all the 12-speed drivetrains that many of my bikes now have made that more difficult, because those quick links I feel are less reusable than previous quick links. I feel like they lose their snap a little bit quicker, and I'm a little bit more nervous of them as well. So I don't like to reuse them too many times.
I call them 4-time use quick links.
4-time use. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. They call them 1-time use.
Yes.
I call it 4.
Would you reuse them for an athlete when you were?
For training, yes, but for race, we would just put new chains on. So no, but yeah, I mean, if I did keep the chain for more than one race weekend, like we had 2 weekends in a row, and if I did pull the chain off, then I would replace the master link, just because we had like an infinite kind of supply in a baggie that they handed us, and you could probably never use them all up. So there was no hurdle or like a barrier to me doing it the right way. But if I had to pay, I mean, a SRAM red 12-speed master link, or like it doesn't have to be red, but just a SRAM 12-speed master link is it's like $8 or something. I mean, it's like quite an expensive. Yeah, it's so yeah. And if you're a waxer or a frequent remover of your, that definitely adds up fast. And we do tell people at the shop, be prepared to buy these in mass quantities, because it seems like those are the same people who are buying bikes with those drivetrains are the people who want to be waxing them. So, that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind. Now, I'd like to return to your reformed state and hear a little more about that. Is it only cost related, or is there more?
So the master links is a big one, but it's also just the improvement and the growth of really good drip-on wax loops. So what I tend to do now is when I install the chain, I will hot melt wax it to begin with, and then I'll basically just use a top-up lube over the top of that. And a lot of that is just mechanics tend to be a little bit lazy with their own bikes. They tend to perhaps cut corners when it comes to their own bikes, because they're spending their days working on other people's bikes. So for me, just putting on a drip wax lube is easier than taking it off and going through the wax process. And yeah, it just simply comes back to the fact that some of these drip lubes, like Ceramic Speed UFO drip, for example, or Silka Super Secret, or even just like a chain lube called Smooth, are all really, really good these days and get you most of the way to the benefits of a hot melt wax. And that's kind of where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I never really got on the wax game myself. I see it with both positives and negatives, and they kind of neutralize, and then it's a time-consuming activity that I feel like isn't worth the time for what you get, what you can achieve another way. So what I like to do, Dave, is totally strip my new chain of all factory grease and start with Ceramic Speed UFO drip lube and just keep going through that. Because the problem I have with wax, among other things, is that it kind of builds up all over the drivetrain, which again, on my own bike, and I'm sort of conscious and meticulous about that, it's no big deal. But when I see people bring in bikes they've waxed the chain on and never really stop to look at anything, first of all, I swear it's over 50% come in with the chains on backwards, which we talked about last week, in directional chains, not necessarily upside down with the flat top chain. That's a unique experience, but backwards Shimano chains and backwards quick links, whether it's installed on a directionally correct chain or not, are very commonly seen. And then just tons of waxy buildup throughout the cassette and on the derailleur pulleys. And I feel like the very nature of applying a drip type lube, kind of you use a hopefully rag to wipe things off at the end, might automatically prohibit or eliminate the likelihood of that buildup occurring. But I feel like it's a good idea, but I just don't really feel like it's worth the practice. And a lot of people are doing it not 100% correctly, and that gives me even further reason to question it for everybody as like a commonly done thing. I mean, there's definitely a place for it for certain people, but I think some people kind of heard about it, thought it was a cool thing to do. It seemed like you were really doing a lot, but you might be doing too much.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there's still genuine benefit to it. Like, durability is unquestionably better if you stay on top of it. If you wait until your chain's squeaking, then you probably are doing quite a bit of damage to your drivetrain, and you're better off just using a really good drip lube. But if you, like, you know, set yourself a timeline and maybe you run 2 or 3 chains and you
I was going to say,
have an efficient way of doing it, then there is real merit to it. And I think, like, you know, you look at the progress Silker has made in the space with like its strip chips that are, you know, allow you to drip a factory grease chain into your wax pot. In my experience, it's not quite perfect, but it's perhaps good enough. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of merit to it. And I guess what's on my mind is that, speaking of Josh Portner at the Spoken Bike Show, he actually informed me that at the Taipei Cycle Show, YBN actually announced new 12-speed Master Links, reusable for 5 times. They'll be doing both flat top Master Links and a more common like Shimano style Master Link. So I guess I may be coming back again to getting my slow cooker going. And where I come at with that is that I live in an apartment. My workshop is elsewhere. And in the apartment, I have to say the hot melt game is better because I don't have to worry about dripping chain lube anywhere, and I don't have to worry about degreases. So, yeah, if I'm at home and I need to lube a chain, there's something to be said about a contained little hot pot thing that stays in the laundry. So that's yeah, I guess on my mind is reformed hot melt wax user, but it's still something I do, and I think there's increasing. Yeah, the tech is still progressing towards me thinking there's space for it. But all while drip lube's getting better.
I know. See, that's the thing for me is like, is it like, let's extrapolate time, effort, money hemorrhaged on Masterlink purchases versus a bottle of lube and a trusty cloth rag.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you got to just live your life a little bit and not necessarily cook your chain all afternoon and do all this stuff. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. And with how good the UFO lube truly is, and we've talked about this before, it's like, I'm serious. You've never tried it. Like, take the time to prep it correctly, but it's and if you are a wax user, hey, maybe try it too, just to see if you really think it's worth it, because you'll know, but better than anybody, how it compares to a wax chain. And
you can use it as a top-up lube, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to. No, you don't have to use each one exclusively. You can.
No, only I would say if you're
something like that UFO drip lube. There's a top-up lube, and then only worry about wax it. You know, using your hot melt once a month or so.
Yeah, exactly. That would be my favorite way of compromising on this topic, Dave, and reaching a happy medium where we don't have to do it so many times, where you're incurring great financial burdens from purchasing all of these various master links, and you save yourself some time, and maybe that time could be better used in another way.
Fair enough. On this topic, I am hearing of an increasing number of world tour teams making the jump to hot melt wax, and not just like time trial day. You put the ceramic speed UFO chain on. They're actually like every day running hot melt wax chains and running like these large ultrasonic cleaners to bulk to basically batch wax chains.
Yeah.
So Jumbo Visma's one. I'm hearing Trek is another that signed a deal with a Hot Networks company. So yeah, it seems to be a trend that we're seeing at the moment. So
my question was, are any of these teams sponsored by the company that makes it? That was my next question. So thank you for answering it already. That's one thing I always like to just bear in mind when I'm observing trends or who's doing what, is who's being paid to do something. So just keep that in mind. But that is the application where I feel like it makes the most sense, is when you have an unlimited supply of chains, mechanics on staff, so you're not having to do it yourself all the time, and the ability to do a huge quantity of chains at once, where you can then both be efficient with your use of the wax itself and have them ready to go after one afternoon of doing all these waxes, and then you have like a tour's worth of chains like in the truck ready. And then that to me is perfectly good use of waxing the chain.
And it's possibly even more efficient for the team because they already would degrease a bike every single day. So this is kind of, in a sense, removing a step.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know how it is on the road side all the time, but very probably they're not going to run chains more than 1 or 2 days worth of time, anyway, just because they don't have to. And, it can degrade. And if you, especially are chasing watts and chasing efficiency in the drivetrain, even if the wear is minimal, if you don't repeat the process, it does degrade rather quickly, I would say, after about it's not quite 1,000 kilometers, 2 days of stage racing, but that's probably pushing the realistic benefit of a wax chain until you need to top it up or do something again. So yeah, I would agree that's probably the best application for it and the best way to manage it, whether at home or on the road at the Tour de France. Have a couple chains and have at least one ready to go when your other one's going in the wax. So you can just put it right on your bike and not have to live waiting and deliberating over, is my chain ready again? So, okay. We can agree. 2 chains minimum. Check your directionality, maybe top up with the drip lube and don't have to take your chain off a million times. Okay. I could get on board with this, Dave. I feel like that's a reasonable way of living your life.
Okay. All right. Great. And amongst all that, if you do that, then you can basically not have to buy a degreaser again, which is
right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I feel satisfied now. If you're listening, you couldn't already tell, my voice is pretty terrible at the moment. So I am going to get close to wrapping it up. We've got one quick little tech bite to cover, which is Giant have brought back the Faith name to its range, and it's now a little cute kid's bike.
It's very cute.
It's very cute. It's very suspended.
Yeah.
It's long travel, full suspension bike. There's 2 sizes. One has a 27.5 front wheel with 26-inch rear. The other is a 24-inch front and rear. The bigger one will set you back $2,600. The smaller one is $100 less than that. But I mean, Giant absolutely are not the first to do full suspension true mountain bikes for like that 5 to 12-year-old range. There are many brands that specialize in this. And then there's also the likes of Norco that have long done it, a few others. But yeah, it is cool to see yet another big brand catering to this market and sort of understanding that little Grom shred. So
yeah, the price is a bit of a sticker shock kind of when I think about what I was trying to convince my parents and then ultimately just trying to mow enough lawns to buy myself when I was a kid. That's like way more expensive for but yeah, what's cheap these days? It's quite a bike though for a little kid, but for a family, a dad who likes to go out and do this, it's definitely, if you put a kid on like kind of a real basic bike, there's no chance you're going to ever ride anywhere close to the same speed if you're riding on the same terrain. So there's definitely, Scott did it when I was kind of debuted a line of kids bikes that were pretty high end when I was affiliated with Scott over the years, of course, Specialized has their own. So it's cool. It's cool to not only like to give like a legit bike to a younger person. It's kind of like we talked about 2 of these Nike kids at the beginning of the broadcast with this new Chisel FS. I think the better experience you have when you're getting involved in riding, the more likely you are to have a positive experience and therefore enjoy it and want to do it, forever. If you ride some piece of crap, then more than likely the effect of that may not lead to a return to the bicycle thereafter. So yeah, I'm into it. It's expensive. Looks pretty good though.
It looks good, yeah. It's like the suspension is weight tuned for really low weights. Like what you'd expect children of that age to be at. Cute little crank lengths. Microchip.
Very, very trendy crank lengths.
So yeah, I think Giant seems to have done a pretty good job of this. I haven't ridden one because I need an adult's bike, but I do appreciate this. So it looks good.
You should do a review on this, Dave.
Yeah,
I want to, maybe for next April's feature. You can do a faith review.
They say in show business never work with children and pets, and many years ago at Bike Radar I actually did a kids bike review where I anyone I knew with kids, I got them to meet me in the park and we did a bike review with 10 different bikes and 8 different kids. It was a fun day out, but I can see where that saying comes from.
Yeah. What did you learn that day? Not much, really. At least not much about bikes, probably, I would guess.
Yeah. It was funny because we'd bought one from the worst bike you could imagine from the department store.
Yeah. Like
a discount department store. And we're that was just purely based on the aesthetics of it. That was the kid's favorite. It was twice the weight of everything else. It was truly a death trap. And
there you go.
Kids loved that one.
The bike industry summarized in one little vignette there, Dave. That was pretty much, that's it. Paint it nice color, put a good sticker on it, and sell it for $2,600.
Yeah. If you've got the Disney franchise for your bikes, you're gonna print money.
Frozen. I'll get the Frozen collection for my bikes.
Brad, I think you've got written on the run sheet that you've got a tip to share. What's the tip?
It's a tip to get more tips, actually. If you like tips like these, tips of this nature, something that occurred to me as I was enjoying some recent mountain bike World Cup racing, which we're in the thick of right now. We have some cross country this weekend. Last weekend, we were both cross country and downhill at Val di Sole in Italy. And I've been watching the downhill. It's always a spectacle. And this year, Aaron Gwynn, who's retired from the sport now, but one of the most successful athletes in our lifetimes, Dave, is now doing some of the commentary. And I've learned a ton. I actually sent him a message about this week just because I've found it so interesting. His mechanic and I worked together for a number of years at Specialized when we overlapped there. And so
is that John Hall?
That's John Hall, the legend. We should get him on one of these days. He's that guy. Speaking of founts of knowledge of all types, bike and otherwise.
He's now working at Intense, I believe.
He is. He's working intensely, doing all sorts of stuff there in product development, among other things. He's racing a bit himself, I saw these days. Good for him, too. I'm glad to see him having a little bit of fun. But anyway, Aaron shares a lot of tips about, bike setup, kind of relative to conditions, how to ride things relative to conditions, or kind of how to approach different terrains, what courses do as relative to moisture, relative to weather, and how to anticipate it. Really, really interesting stuff. Some of it not as intuitive as it may seem, but I just have been finding his commentary to be particularly enlightening. And I've thought about a lot of these things myself over the years. So if you want to kind of get a fast track to the highest level of knowledge. I mean, he was always known for his bike setups and the thorough kind of thought and effort put into really refining his setups. And you may remember him winning a downhill without a chain, which a lot of his rider skill, a lot of it also is how well they set that suspension up on a bike that can be ridden that fast without being pedaled for an entire run when it broke on the start gate. So he comes with a lot of credentials, and so I take him at his word, but I've heard a lot of things that he just kind of casually mentions off the cuff watching these guys runs live as he does the commentary that I find really interesting. And so, yeah, if you happen to be able to watch some of these races, the same is true in the cross country too, but Aaron's really jumped out at me this week in particular because they had some variable weather on one of probably the hardest tracks, if not the hardest track of the season. So I learned some stuff and I thought it was pretty cool. I just wanted to tell other people who may like to watch some bike racing that you may stand to learn something in addition to being entertained by how fast those guys can ride some stuff that I can't believe is even rideable in the first place. So good job, Aaron.
Good tip. In Australia, watching the mountain bike World Cups is now very expensive. So
I know, I've heard that. Beck Henderson really
guilty of not paying attention this year.
I'll tell you anything happens if it's interesting. Don't worry.
It's a shame, and I'm going to give you a plug, Brad, because I've had the feedback that people from outside the mountain bike world have enjoyed your insights to date, but wonder how you fit in. And back when Red Bull owned the rights to mountain bike World Cups, it felt like any time Red Bull needed the insight of the mechanic, you found yourself on camera.
Yeah, well, okay, that's true for probably two reasons. One, I was working for Kate Courtney, who as a Red Bull sponsored athlete. I feel like they tend to, when they were also broadcasting the races, show their own a little bit for like the kind of so-called free publicity of putting their own branding on your screens as often as possible. But it also, I think, behooved them to find a mechanic who spoke English well. And when you're in the presence of who are mostly Swiss, German, and European, who may feel like English as a second language is not something they are comfortable giving on-screen live impromptu kind of interviews, they I think is probably more efficient from the time side of things and maybe coherent too, hopefully at least. But yeah, so I did spend.
And plus, you had flowing long locks back then.
I did. I know. I cut them, and now it's it's all over. But yeah, I used to actually talk to. There's a guy who was responsible for, I think it was all of snow and bike athlete sponsorships globally. This happened like kind of eventually after I sort of demonstrated some competence for a number of years. I actually could. They have, I guess, in every discipline, they have sponsored athletes, and they have like somebody who works in that field specifically as like a person on the ground who can really give actual insight, because they have, people from the Red Bull markets all over the world identifying athletes from their country where they're like, they should get a sponsorship, and then he's like, well, how do they really stack up in the grand scheme of things? And so I actually got to contribute some feedback in that realm as well, just specific to Red Bull related affiliations. But yeah, if you go back and watch like early seasons of like Fast Life, which had Kate, Finn Isles, and Loic Bruni, featured in those a couple times, and definitely on some race, little moments in the race when you come through the tech zone and ask some random question about something that's going on in the race. You may see me there if you watch some archive race footage.
Nice. Yeah. I certainly felt like I knew through that, even though we spoke plenty over the years.
Yes.
Yeah, it's you were on my TV almost every second week.
Oh God, I hope that warmed your home, your hearth.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So, thank you for your contribution to the mountain bike world, Brad.
It's a pleasure. I hope to continue to contribute to it in some respects for a while, but I'll keep you posted on those plans. They're cooking right now. It's like with chain. We can make a chain. Go back to the chain wax, and I'm kind of on a slow simmer right now with some future plans. So we'll see if I can touch a race bike again one day.
Interesting, very interesting. All right, I think that's as good as any time to wrap it up. So thank you, Brad. Great to see you as always.
Hope you feel better over there, Dave.
Yeah. My voice is terrible. So this is sorry to everyone that's had to listen to pubescent Dave. But this is hopefully next week my voice will be back to its regular still slightly whiny sound. And with that, I guess Geek Warning, as always, is brought to you by members of escapecollective.com. So thank you to everyone that makes this podcast possible and makes it exist, and everything else that we do on Escape Collective. And if you haven't already, please consider joining. Each membership really does go a long way to making our business successful, sustainable, and hopefully one day thriving. So thank you. Until next week. Cheers.
Bye-bye.